At 28 years old, Jiro Tanaka has spent almost 7 years without being in a relationship and is currently unemployed. It has been almost a week since he started living this life of freedom. When he worked at his previous company, he put in almost 120 hours of overtime every month and even worked on holidays, yet he was never paid for all his efforts. The company he worked for was an undisputed black company, and his boss, who made them work through the entire night, was known as the all-night boss. One day, while Jiro is working at the company, his boss approaches him and harshly demands that he hand over yesterday's reports because it is already late. His boss even threatens to fire him, saying that there are plenty of other people who can do his job. Hearing that harsh tone, something inside Jiro finally snaps. He stands up and leaves without even looking back. It is his breaking point, so he simply gathers all of his personal belongings and walks out of the company right away. Even though he is unemployed now, he still finds it difficult to get used to this freedom. After leaving his job, he does not feel guilty and only feels a tiny bit bad for the junior who cares about him, but he is sure that person will be doing fine. Jiro even has enough savings because he never has the time to spend the money he earns. He can live for almost a year without finding another job, but he knows he cannot continue living like this forever and understands that his situation is still quite catastrophic. He spends most of his time smoking in his apartment and occasionally wandering around outside. One day, he goes out to collect his mail. After picking up an envelope, he starts heading back toward his apartment while planning to sleep for the rest of the day. As he looks through the pile of mail, he finds a religious solicitation leaflet along with several job advertisements. While casually browsing through the job listings, one particular flyer catches his attention. Jiro is shocked when he sees that the job being advertised is for a dungeon tester. He cannot believe what he is reading. He does not think that this kind of job actually exists and is certain that somebody has created it as a prank. He still cannot help but read the flyer and is surprised to see that it comes with really good conditions, including dormitories and various other benefits. He decides to put it aside for the time being and sleep first. However, after lying down on his bed, he remains wide awake. As he reaches for a cigarette, he becomes irritated when he realizes that the pack is empty. His thoughts once again drift toward the flyer about the dungeon tester position. It reminds him of how much he enjoyed playing RPG games in the past. He still even has a pile of game CDs stored away. Sitting up on the bed, he becomes increasingly curious about the whole thing. It seems strange that someone would go through so much effort to create such an attractive job advertisement if it is nothing more than a prank. As he thinks about it, Jiro realizes that he has not done any sword practice for quite a while despite having some experience in kendo. He picks up a sword and decides that even if the whole thing is a prank, he currently has plenty of free time on his hands. Because of that, he might as well go and see what kind of people are behind it. With that in mind, he calls the number written on the flyer and receives a response from someone named Suera. Suera, who introduces herself as the direct recruitment officer, sounds surprised that he is speaking Japanese. The next day, Jiro decides to visit the location. Upon arriving, he is surprised by the sheer size of the building. He has never heard of a company called Mao before, but he decides to enter anyway. The moment he steps inside, he is shocked to see several girls with unnaturally long ears sitting behind the reception desk. He introduces himself and mentions that he is there for the dungeon tester interview. One of the girls invites him to come with her and introduces herself as Suera. As Jiro sits in the waiting area, he cannot help but notice the girl's unusually long ears and dark complexions. He is certain that people in this country do not normally look like this and starts wondering if he has somehow wandered into a movie studio. Just then, a cup of coffee suddenly comes floating toward him. He quickly catches the cup and carefully examines it, but he cannot find anything suspicious. A moment later, another woman approaches him and inquires whether the coffee is acceptable. She once again introduces herself as Suera and informs him that she will be conducting his interview. Jiro immediately stands up in a rush as Suera motions for him to follow her. As they walk, he notices how admirable and beautiful she looks. Suddenly, a pen slips from Suera's hand. Both she and Jiro crouch down at the same time to pick it up. While reaching for the pen, Jiro accidentally touches her hand and immediately feels what seems like an electric jolt run through him. He quickly pulls back and repeatedly apologizes for the accidental contact. Soon afterward, the two of them are seated inside an interview room. As the interview begins, Jiro notices Suera's long ears but chooses not to comment on them. To his surprise, she opens the interview by asking him what he thinks of her appearance. The question catches Jiro completely off guard, and for a moment he cannot think of a proper response. After hesitating, he quietly mumbles that she looks like a dark elf. Once he gives his answer, he sits there nervously while Suera continues staring at him without saying anything. The silence makes him extremely uncomfortable. A strange wind suddenly surrounds him for a brief moment, and Jiro finally lets out a sigh of relief when the sensation comes to an end. He cannot believe the kind of answer he just gave during an interview, but to his complete shock, Suera suddenly announces that he has passed. She reasons that since he is able to see her true appearance, it is only natural that he possesses a high magical power aptitude. Feeling a bit confused, Jiro asks if she means real magic. Suera confirms that she does and snaps her fingers, causing a burst of flames to appear above her head. She describes magical power aptitude as something similar to a person's natural vessel capacity. It determines how much magical power someone can store and utilize, and it is measured on a scale from 0 to 10. She further notes that this value can never be changed or increased. A person born with a magical power level of 0 will never be able to use magic for their entire life. Suera then reveals that his magical power aptitude is at least level 4. Jiro is confused about how she is able to determine that. In response, Suera discloses that they have actually been testing him long before the interview officially began. Jiro does not remember undergoing any tests, so Suera proceeds to outline each one in detail. The first test is the flyer itself. According to her, anyone below level 1 magical power aptitude will only see the flyer as a blank piece of paper. The second test is the barrier surrounding the building. Only people with at least level 2 magical power aptitude are capable of passing through it. The third test involves the receptionist. Their true appearances are concealed using low-level concealment magic. Anyone below level 3 magical power aptitude will simply perceive them as ordinary humans. The fourth and final test is Suera herself. Only people with a magical power aptitude of level 4 or higher are able to see her true appearance. Suera also mentions that she evaluated his personality earlier when the two of them accidentally touched hands. Since he successfully passes all of the tests, he fulfills every requirement necessary for the position. Afterward, Suera begins detailing the true nature of the job. She informs him that the Demon Army is currently engaged in a war against the residents of Light in another world. The most important fortress connecting the two worlds is the dungeon. Whenever a new Demon King appears, a hero is dispatched by the forces of Light to challenge the dungeon. With a determined expression, Suera emphasizes that the hero must never be allowed to conquer the dungeon. In order to create an absolutely impenetrable dungeon, they need his assistance as a dungeon tester. Everything still sounds unbelievable to Jiro, but when Suera wonders whether he would like to see the dungeon for himself, he immediately agrees. The two of them leave the interview room together. As they walk through the corridors, Jiro is surprised to overhear goblins casually talking among themselves. Along the way, he also encounters various other strange creatures, including a demon fairy and a cat lady. The further they go, the more unusual sights he witnesses. When Jiro slows down to look around, Suera inquires whether he finds everything surprising. With a smile, Jiro replies that he actually thinks everyone there is incredibly beautiful, including Suera herself. The moment the words leave his mouth, he realizes how strange they sound. He quickly tries to pass it off as a joke, but Suera still blushes deeply after receiving the compliment. Soon they arrive at a room where Suera remarks that it leads directly to the entrance floor of the dungeon. Jiro looks ahead and is completely stunned as he sees a real dungeon with his own eyes for the first time. Suera notes that this particular dungeon belongs to the Demon General Kigyou. She further mentions that there are 7 dungeons in total, each one managed by one of the 7 generals serving under the Demon King. Although she cannot show him every dungeon right now, she still wants to know what he thinks of the place. Jiro simply stands there with his mouth hanging open. He still cannot believe that everything around him is actually real. At that moment, a dragon suddenly flies overhead, startling him even further. Feeling overwhelmed, he sits down on a nearby stone while his body trembles slightly. When he inquires whether he is allowed to smoke, Suera gives him permission. He immediately lights a cigarette in an attempt to calm himself down. As he takes a drag, he quietly mumbles that this is bad because his excitement is already going completely out of control right from the very start. Jiro naturally wonders what will happen if he decides not to take the job. Suera clarifies that many people choose to decline positions like this. Whenever that happens, they are required to perform a memory erasure procedure in order to maintain confidentiality. According to her, the method leaves only a very minor and lasting impact on the human body. If Jiro chooses to leave, he will not remember anything he has seen or learned there. After hearing that, Jiro brings up the war itself. In response, Suera states that she has heard the reason behind the conflict is actually something very trivial. She reveals that the Demon King army originally comes from Ishwar as well. According to the story passed down through the generations nearly 5,000 years ago, the conflict between the people of light and darkness grew so severe that both sides began to see the destruction of everything approaching. In order to prevent the complete ruin of the world, their ancestral moon god divided the light and the dark and transported one side to another world, ultimately saving Earth from destruction. Suera further elaborates that the dungeon was originally created as a pathway back home in case peace was ever achieved between the two sides. However, the divide between them was never bridged, and the conflict continued even after thousands of years. Although she has never personally seen Ishwar herself, Suera admits that both her body and soul constantly long for it. She wants to stand upon its soil, bathe beneath its sun, feel its water, and experience the breeze that blows across its lands. She adds that almost every soldier within the Demon King army shares the same dream. Their greatest wish is simply to return to their homeland one day. After hearing the entire story, Jiro remains silent for a moment. He takes some time to process everything before commenting that the situation feels incredibly huge and far beyond anything he has ever imagined. He honestly admits that he does not even know how he is supposed to feel about it. Jiro then confesses that he is actually scared. Everything about this company is far from normal. He realizes that he is merely a jobless man approaching 30 years old and not someone who is at an age where changing careers so drastically should be easy. Part of him wants to throw logic aside and embrace what is happening in front of him, but another part of him is genuinely frightened by everything he has witnessed. The entire situation reminds him of how carefree life felt when he was a child, before reality became so complicated. After thinking about it for a while, Jiro admits that although everything seems frightening, he does have some confidence in himself. He used to practice kendo and believes he has the courage to take on a job like this. More than anything else, Jiro simply cannot ignore what is standing before him. After witnessing a genuine fantasy world with his own eyes and seeing Suera standing before him in all her beauty, he can no longer deny the excitement growing inside him. Finally making up his mind, Jiro stands up and asks Suera whether they would truly be willing to hire someone like him. In response, Suera respectfully bows her head before him and formally welcomes him into the Demon King army. Jiro is standing in his gear while experiencing combat training in this fantasy world. He suddenly jumps back as Suera attacks him with her weapon and strikes him directly. The impact is so powerful that he feels as if he is not wearing any armor at all. Jiro immediately falls to the floor and trembles violently from the pain. He complains that Suera shows absolutely no hesitation despite being a woman, and declares that one day he is definitely going to defeat her. With a slight smile on her face, she walks toward him and asks if he is alright. Jiro only feels more annoyed by the question because he is clearly struggling to recover. Suera appears amused by the situation and casually comments that the attack is light, so he will be perfectly fine. As they stand facing each other, Jiro recalls how he is originally nothing more than an ordinary company employee. Now, however, he has changed his occupation and become a dungeon tester for the Demon King army. According to him, this is exactly why he is currently being bullied by a dark elf. Earlier, Suera told him that he possesses great magical power aptitude. Even so, it will be nearly impossible for him to properly handle magical power in his current state. Because of that, he must learn how to absorb and utilize the magical energy that fills the dungeon itself. Suera explains that she is going to inscribe a magical crest onto his body. This crest will strengthen his body and help him channel the magical power within him. Jiro has no idea what a magical crest actually is, but he lies down on a bed while feeling extremely nervous about what is about to happen. He asks Suera whether the carving process is going to be painful. Her initial response makes him even more nervous, but she soon smiles and explains that she is only joking. According to her, he is not going to feel any pain during the process at all. Suera tells him to remain still as she begins drawing gentle strokes across his chest and back. Just as she promises, Jiro does not feel any pain. Instead, the process only makes him feel slightly ticklish. After some time, Suera announces that she is finished. She clarifies that the crest now only needs a small amount of magical power in order to activate. Before he can even understand what she means, she transfers a portion of her magical power into him. The moment the crest activates, his body undergoes an immediate change. He feels extremely strange as he looks down at himself. According to him, his body suddenly feels much lighter, almost as if gravity itself has weakened. Suera explains that the basic level physical enhancement buff has now been activated. After experiencing this dramatic change, Jiro feels as though he can accomplish anything. Excited by his newfound strength, he immediately decides to test it for himself by jumping around. Before Suera can even warn him, Jiro leaps into the air while completely underestimating his own physical abilities. As a result, he crashes directly into the ceiling. Suera quickly reacts and uses wind magic to safely lower him back down. Jiro sits on the floor feeling relieved that he avoids seriously hurting himself. Suera immediately begins scolding him for recklessly using all of his strength without thinking. However, when she notices that he is actually laughing, she becomes even more frustrated and scolds him once again for taking the situation so lightly. Jiro tries to explain that the experience simply makes him feel a bit childish and excited. Suera, however, warns him that he is eventually going to hurt himself if he keeps behaving that way. She then tells him to put on some comfortable clothes. After that, she explains that his body has already transcended the physical limitations of an ordinary human. Because of this, he should not be so careless about his newfound abilities. Jiro simply agrees with her advice. While changing, he notices that all of the marks that appear on his body during the crest inscription process have completely disappeared. Afterward, Suera says that it is time to examine his status. She takes out a tablet-like device and explains that it operates using magical power and is capable of measuring a person's abilities. Jiro immediately becomes excited when he sees it. Looking over the various values and qualities displayed on the tablet makes him feel especially thrilled because it reminds him of the status screens he always sees in games. Jiro excitedly looks at his status and reads his level. Curious about the result, he asks Suera whether it is considered high. Suera explains that most adults in this area, called Nihoshi, possess less than average physical strength, making his current status quite respectable. As she continues looking through his status sheet, Suera suddenly points out that his nicotine addiction level is completely abnormal. She suggests that it would be best for him to quit smoking if possible. Jiro says that he will try to stop, although he is not entirely confident that he can actually do it. He then comments on how amazing the magical crest truly is and admits that he wants to test his strength even further. Hearing that enthusiasm, Suera suggests having a mock battle. Jiro immediately agrees to the idea. However, now that he is actually standing in front of Suera and struggling just to keep up with her, he finds himself wanting to take those words back. The moment the battle begins, he quickly realizes just how strong she really is. When Suera charges toward him again, Jiro tells himself that she is still his opponent. Even if he is going to lose, he at least wants to put up a decent fight. Motivated by that thought, he loudly challenges Suera to attack him again. Unfortunately, his determination does not produce the results he hopes for. Suera's weapon immediately slams into his head, sending him crashing straight to the ground. Standing beside him, Suera comments that confidence is certainly an admirable quality. However, she also believes that people should only attempt such reckless moves when they are reasonably certain they can win. Jiro is completely knocked out and ends up lying there unconscious. Rather than hearing her lecture, he accidentally gets a glimpse of Suera's clothing while lying on the ground. Later, he sits across from Suera while she examines the large bump that forms on his head. She performs a healing spell, and the pain quickly fades away. Seeing how interested he is in the magic, Suera explains that she is a wizard, so healing and support magic come naturally to her. At the same time, she quietly admits to herself that she once again goes overboard during training. She also finds herself feeling embarrassed about her choice of clothing on a daily basis. A little later, Jiro asks how he manages to get completely overpowered by a wizard. To him, that seems like proof that he lacks talent. Suera immediately disagrees with that conclusion. She explains that a magical crest functions by absorbing magical power and releasing it throughout the body. Once it takes root, it develops and grows much like a plant. She further explains that even if someone possesses tremendous potential, daily training remains essential. A person's status grows according to their effort and experience. Hearing this explanation, Jiro finally understands why he is still only level 1. For the time being, Suera suggests that they stop sparring with each other. Even so, she remains extremely surprised by the fact that his magical aptitude reaches level 8. According to her, that level of aptitude suggests that he possesses the potential to become a general class individual. Jiro is confused by her reaction. He does not feel particularly special and asks whether his aptitude is really that impressive. Suera strongly insists that it is. According to her, his potential is roughly 4 times greater than her own. Jiro still finds it difficult to believe and assumes that there must be many people who surpass him. His humble attitude begins to annoy Suera slightly. She tells him that he has already become the main topic of discussion within the personnel department. Everyone considers themselves incredibly fortunate to have discovered someone like him. What she does not tell him is that she personally spends a great deal of time bragging to everyone about finding such a promising recruit. Suera then explains that sooner or later she will no longer be able to help him with everything. Because of that, he needs to start believing in himself. Jiro is still struggling to fully accept her words as Suera explains that, to the Demon King army, he is practically a ray of hope. Suddenly, she steps closer to him and grabs his hand. Looking unusually serious, she almost begs him never to quit. Suera cannot bring herself to tell him just how chaotic the personnel department currently is. Recruiting new employees has become incredibly difficult, and very few people have been coming to them lately. She admits that if he refuses to join, the department might never fully recover from the situation. A moment later, she realizes how close she is standing to him and quickly lets go of his hand. Embarrassed by her own behavior, she steps back and apologizes. After getting past the awkward moment, the two of them continue their mock battle. Later, while walking through the corridors, Jiro recalls how the second half of the training session turned out to be completely one-sided. He does not manage to win a single match against Suera, and he feels somewhat embarrassed by just how badly he loses. Eventually, he heads toward his assigned department. Since he has decided to work for the Mao Corporation, he has also chosen to move into the company's residential housing. As he approaches the building, Jiro still cannot believe that they are able to provide accommodations of this scale. All of the company housing is located there. When he finally enters his dormitory room, He is stunned by how spacious it is. The place contains numerous facilities and is almost large enough for an entire family. There is even a loft inside. He proceeds to inspect the room in greater detail. When he enters the bathroom, he discovers a massive bathtub. Even the refrigerator in the kitchen is surprisingly huge. After enjoying a relaxing bath, Jiro sits down on the sofa and begins thinking about what Suera told him earlier. She explains that leaking information from this place is extremely difficult, which is likely one of the reasons employees live so close to the workplace. The more he thinks about it, the more satisfied he becomes with his new living arrangements. He genuinely likes the room and feels grateful for everything he has been given. Suddenly, his eyes fall upon the tablet used for measuring status. Feeling curious, he picks it up and decides to take another look at his status. It makes Jiro really happy to see his status increasing, and he feels genuinely impressed by his own growth. He cannot believe that he has actually improved, even after being completely beaten up in the mock battle. He has never experienced anything like this in his previous job, and he slowly begins to feel that switching careers was the right decision. For the first time, he feels a sense of satisfaction about his current situation. There is also another positive aspect of this job, Suera. He recalls how she used to call him by his surname, but now she has started calling him Jiro instead. This small change gives him even more motivation. Feeling encouraged, Jiro decides that he will do his best starting from tomorrow. Suera wakes up calmly and moves around her house quickly while getting ready for the day. After dressing up, she checks Jiro's profile and quietly mumbles that he must already be in the lecture room at this time. As she says this, Jiro is already sitting in the lecture hall, feeling annoyed by how noisy it is. He notices how large the place is, yet it feels strangely empty, which makes it clear that the personnel department is struggling to recruit people. Just then, their teacher announces that the lecture is about to begin. The professor explains that he will be teaching them about the demons present in the dungeon. He states that there are basically two types of monsters. The first type is soul demons, and the second type is blood demons. In general, soul demons have bodies made entirely of magical power, and when they are killed, they simply disappear. Meanwhile, blood demons possess physical bodies and leave behind corpses when they are killed. Their capabilities are 3 to 10 times higher than those of soul demons. He further explains that magical ability grows by fighting demons. The more they fight, the more their power increases, and that is how they become stronger. The professor adds that if they ever encounter a blood demon, it is better to run away as they are far beyond what most of them can handle. Of course, they can request help and use safety measures on the spot, but even then, survival is not guaranteed, and there is no assurance that they will escape unharmed. Seeing the terrified expressions of the students, the professor decides to shift the topic. He explains that although it is said that soul demons disappear upon death, there is a possibility that they leave something behind in this world, known as drops. These drops are extremely valuable raw materials. After describing soul-type demons, he adds that drops from blood demons are traded at a high value, and everyone is allowed to collect and sell these items freely. The purchase of drops is handled at the company's central facility, and students are required to use that system. It is not possible to take drop items outside the premises, so it is better to sell them there. Otherwise, they will simply decay and become useless. Hearing all of this, Jiro suddenly raises his hand and asks whether it means they can keep the drops as a bonus. The professor is surprised by the question and responds that there are indeed bonuses for it and separate bonuses as well. Jiro is shocked to learn that this place actually has such incentives. If students choose to hunt blood demons, they are allowed to keep all the money they earn, which means it is possible to make a significant income here. The professor is surprised to see how excited Jiro becomes. Meanwhile, Jiro recalls how his previous company never had any bonuses at all. The boss had openly stated that there were no bonuses, which made him realize how terrible his old workplace truly was and how this new company feels like heaven in comparison. He becomes so emotionally moved by this realization that tears begin to form in his eyes. The lecture then ends and the professor asks if anyone has questions, but no one responds. He then outlines the final step, which is the submission of answer sheets for job selection. There are 3 main job choices: Vanguard, Ranger, and Rear Guard. Everyone must choose one, and each role has different skills and training paths, so they are advised to think carefully before deciding. He states that those who have made their decision can leave. The students immediately begin discussing and trying to decide their roles. Most of them lean toward wizard-related positions, excited by the idea of learning magic in the company. A few girls appear especially interested in the possibility that Professor Royce might personally teach them magic. Jiro sits quietly in his seat, observing the room. He notices that many people are choosing rear guard roles. He understands their reasoning since this is a magical company and they will need to use magic in combat situations. However, he does not agree with their choices. Instead, he decides that he will choose the Vanguard role as his position. Somewhere deep inside a dungeon in hell, 2 unusual-looking men are having a conversation about a new recruit. They talk about how they become curious after hearing that this newcomer possesses a magical aptitude of 8. The other man replies that the individual does not look very impressive. Jiro is standing in front of them, trembling slightly as sweat forms on his forehead. He looks at his new instructors in fear, realizing that they are a demon and a mummy. He never expected instructors like this and whispers to Suera that this situation does not feel good. Suera tries to introduce the two instructors to him, but she is interrupted by the mummy, who points out that Jiro is not speaking much. The mummy introduces himself as Fusio, while the demon introduces himself as Kigyou. They both announce that they will be his personal instructors and greet him. They completely ignore Jiro afterward and continue speaking among themselves. Kigyou asks Fusio about Jiro's soul, staring at him closely. Fusio replies that his soul looks dim, dull, and slightly muddy. Jiro cannot understand what they are talking about. Kigyou then turns to Suera and says that Jiro is clearly not the person she described. Suera, slightly annoyed, replies that Jiro has just joined the company, so it is natural for him to be weak at the moment. Kigyou points out that she was the one who had been praising him so highly before. Suera quickly changes the topic and says that the situation is a bit sudden, but she is still grateful for their cooperation. However, she requests that they go easy on the new recruit. Kigyou comments that she seems overly protective. When Suera insists that Jiro is actually very capable, Kigyou and Fusio tease her further, implying that she is simply trying to have fun in the personnel department. At that moment, Jiro suddenly raises his voice and says that he wants to ask a question. Once he gets their attention, he asks whether he is the only person who has chosen the Vanguard job. Kigyou replies that yes, he is the only one, meaning he will receive both of them as his instructors. Kigyou adds that they even have the entire training ground to themselves, so Jiro should be grateful for such generous treatment. They then ask if he is afraid of being alone. Jiro calmly responds that since he is already here, that is all that matters. Suera begins to worry about him. Kigyou then asks whether all humans are like this. With a thin, mocking smile, he says that if Jiro is as fragile as he looks, it will be disappointing. He tries to provoke Jiro into attacking first. Jiro does not respond, realizing that they are deliberately trying to provoke him. Even so, he refuses to back down and takes a step forward instead of running away. Standing firmly in front of them, he says that he looks forward to their guidance and support, and even asks them to go easy on him. Suera watches anxiously, worried about how he is handling the situation. Kigyou chuckles at his response, seemingly amused that Jiro is showing a bit of confidence. Fusio also appears pleased that Jiro is not acting ashamed or intimidated. After this exchange, they both agree to begin his training. Still concerned, Suera once again tells them to take proper care of Jiro. Kigyou steps forward first and tells Jiro to attack him from any direction, promising that he will go easy on him. Jiro is surprised to see that Kigyou is only holding a rod. Before he can make a move, Suera suddenly shouts from the side, warning him that anything Kigyou holds becomes as powerful as a magical sword. Jiro realizes once again that this is a real fantasy world. Even if they are trying to underestimate him, he decides that he will not back down. Determined to prove himself from the very beginning, he prepares himself as he charges toward Kigyou with full strength. When Jiro strikes Kigyou on the side of his face, it only mildly irritates the demon. Kigyou immediately strikes back while muttering that Jiro needs to think properly before attempting to hit him. His single counterattack is enough to send Jiro crashing to the ground, and his protective gear is instantly torn apart from the impact. Suera shouts from the side and quickly runs toward Jiro. He rolls across the ground before finally coming to a stop. She is shocked to see how damaged his body and equipment are. Without wasting time, she removes his helmet as he struggles to breathe, coughing heavily before slowly regaining consciousness. Fusio, the mummy, comments that Kigyou is still as strong as ever, just like before. When Suera scolds him, he quickly apologizes and adds that everything is fine since Jiro receives treatment in time. However, Fusio also points out that Jiro might leave as soon as he wakes up before they can discuss anything further. Jiro coughs and slowly regains full awareness. As he sits up, both instructors are surprised that he is not as weak as he initially appeared. After waking, Jiro asks whether that was the full extent of their strength. Fusio replies that what Jiro experiences is similar to being hit directly without any protection, implying how overwhelming the attack was. Jiro remembers that he cannot see the attack coming at all and even wishes that Suera had recorded it for him. Kigyou laughs at his reaction and tells him to get up if he wants to go again. Before Jiro can respond, Suera immediately shouts that they will not continue today. However, Jiro interrupts her and insists that he still wants to continue. He struggles to stand on his feet, while Suera no longer argues and only advises him to change his armor first. Looking down, Jiro is shocked to see that his armor is completely shattered. After replacing his equipment, Jiro realizes that he had almost died just moments ago. This frustrates him, especially because it has been a while since he last faced something like this, and he almost forgets what it feels like to be in a real combat situation. Despite the danger, his determination grows even stronger. He prepares himself to strike again, ignoring the risks, while Suera warns him not to push himself too far due to his condition. As he picks up his sword, he once again asks his instructor to come at him. After the exchange, Fusio asks Kigyou for his opinion. Kigyou responds that at first he was unsure, but now he can confidently say that Jiro is a suitable candidate. As Suera tries to pull Jiro aside, they decide that this much training is enough for the day. Kigyou comments that it is unusual to see someone so reckless within the Demon King army. Fusio adds that soldiers usually shine when they are full of life, but in Jiro's case, his soul seems to shine even when he is on the brink of death. He explains that even when Jiro is in pain and unable to move, his eyes still show determination. Because of this, Fusio describes Jiro's soul as dim and dull, similar to rugged steel. Kigyou does not take it seriously and instead jokes that Jiro looks like a bald-headed cockroach. Both instructors are immediately scolded by Suera, who says she had a bad feeling when she learned that 2 of the 7 generals would be involved in training Jiro. Now she is certain that this type of training may end up damaging a talented individual. Kigyou casually responds that Vanguard fighters cannot be trained gently and assures her that Jiro will grow stronger in the future. Fusio also adds that Jiro is now looking much more stable than before. He then announces that he will take responsibility for Jiro's training the next day. As they finalize the training plan, Suera looks at Jiro and quietly mumbles that she will protect him. Seeing her reaction, the instructors become curious and ask whether she is friends with Jiro. Kigyou comments that it seems like spring has finally arrived for her. He jokes that he has heard dark elves are passionate when it comes to love, but he never expected her to choose someone from another world. Suera becomes visibly flustered by their comments, her face turning deeply red as she struggles to respond. The next few weeks are extremely difficult for Jiro, as he struggles just to survive. From the day he chooses to become a vanguard, his life turns into a living hell. Every day he endures brutal training under his instructors. Fusio trains him to counter wizards, but his methods are so harsh that Jiro becomes convinced he will not survive much longer. Meanwhile, Kigyou focuses on improving his close combat skills as a vanguard, and his training is equally relentless, leaving Jiro beaten down day after day. He starts to feel as if his instructors are actively trying to kill him. As time passes, other frustrations begin to weigh on him as well. While walking to class, he overhears girls whispering about how exhausted and broken he looks every day, even calling him a failure. The same nickname spreads among his classmates. Later, he learns that most of the other students are much younger than him. Suera explains that he is the only one who changed his job, while the rest are regular part-timers who are significantly younger. Because of this age gap and his constant injuries from training, he becomes an easy target for ridicule among the students. This makes him extremely angry, but he cannot do anything about it. Even though he feels isolated and frustrated, he still has more important things to focus on. He must endure the harsh training if he wants to become stronger. During one of the training sessions, Kigyou tells him that several months have already passed since they began training him. He says that Jiro needs to endure this phase and continue growing stronger, and he instructs him to prepare for an upcoming joint training session. Soon after, all the students are gathered inside the dungeon when a beautiful woman appears and tells everyone to listen carefully. She announces that they are going to conduct a final training session. The woman is introduced as Evia, the head of the Human Resource Department. She explains that the session is a dungeon combat experience in which students from all job classes are gathered together to fight. Their task is simple. They must repel soul demons that emerge from a magic circle for 1 hour. As time passes, the enemies will become stronger. They are not allowed to leave the area during the session, but she guarantees that they will survive. However, if anyone feels they cannot continue, they may escape through her barrier, though doing so will mark them as someone who has quit. She adds that they are free to form groups if they wish. With a final warning not to disappoint her, she tells them to get ready. Standing alone at the side, Jiro observes the other participants and notices why there are so many wizards. He is also surprised to see a magic swordsman, something he did not even know existed. Soon, Evia signals the start of the exercise. A flash of lightning appears in front of them as the dungeon opens, and the heads of goblins emerge from the magic circle. Jiro closely observes them and notices that they are different from the goblin employees he has seen before, as these are purely formed from magic. Some of the students find the goblins disgusting and are overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. The wizards quickly begin casting spells, attacking the incoming enemies with magic. Jiro is amazed to see humans using magic so freely, though he also feels that they are not on the level of Instructor Fusio. As he watches the wizards handle the goblins easily at first, he begins to regret choosing the vanguard role. The wizards grow more confident as they continue attacking, dismissing the goblins as harmless and weak. However, Jiro soon notices that the situation begins to change. The wizards start to feel pressured as the goblins increase in number and begin pushing them back. Their concentrated attacks start to lose effectiveness, and they become visibly tired, even running out of resources. Because the wizards focus their attacks in one direction, the soul goblins split into two groups and prepare a pincer attack. One of the goblins suddenly moves toward a girl standing at the side. Jiro immediately notices the danger. Without hesitation, he rushes in and destroys the goblin with a single strike of his sword. Seeing the girl sitting on the ground, trembling in fear, he shouts at her to get up, telling her that she becomes an easy target while staying in that position. Jiro quickly jumps into action and activates his monkey screaming skill. He stands in place and screams loudly, releasing sound waves that repel the goblins away from him. He feels relieved when he notices that the enemies stop advancing. He immediately turns toward the wizards and tells them to keep moving until the situation is under control. He says that he will handle one side while they take care of the other. Jiro knows that this skill is extremely difficult to use, but he still grips his sword with both hands and launches a powerful strike. When he sees goblins crashing to the ground, it motivates him and convinces him that he can actually handle these enemies. Just then, one of the goblins slaps him across the face, causing Jiro to stumble backward. However, the hit only makes him angrier, and he quickly turns around and kills the goblin. As Jiro continues fighting, he remembers the faces of his instructors. He realizes that he has already been through hell repeatedly, and compared to that, this kind of attack feels insignificant. He also thinks that if he retreats now, his instructors will definitely punish him afterward. After some time, several wizards begin leaving through the portal, completely exhausted from the battle. Jiro becomes slightly annoyed by this, as their departure causes the group to become outnumbered. He notices that even though less than 30 minutes have passed, many of them are already quitting. To Jiro, the situation feels like a death march, but he does not give up. He is used to this kind of overworking from his previous job, so he pushes forward without hesitation. In a viewing room, Kigyou laughs while watching Jiro fight, thinking that he is completely insane. Fuzio and the other generals of the Demon King army also find Jiro extremely interesting. Suera is the only one who appears worried as she watches him being constantly attacked. She feels that they should have taught him some magic to better support himself. Hearing this, Kigyou replies that Jiro does not have the strength to learn magic at his current stage, and if they had forced him into it within a month, it would have caused problems for Suera instead. The group then turns its attention to another instructor, commenting that she seems to be having a difficult time training him. The woman, Lunaria, one of the generals of the Demon King army, does not offer any excuses. Fuzio also states that they cannot blame Suera, as she already has many students to manage. Just then, someone else arrives and asks if they are watching something interesting. The group immediately bows in respect, not expecting his presence. The newcomer, the president, tells them to act normally and not be so formal. He then asks why they are there, and he replies that he came because of the rumored individual he has been hearing about. He wanted to see for himself. As he observes Jiro fighting fearlessly on the screen, his curiosity increases, and he expresses that he would like to meet Jiro in person. In the classroom, Instructor Idia announces that the initiation ceremony is about to begin. After completing the training tests, a total of 44 full-time and part-time employees have been officially hired by the company. Jiro hears this with surprise, noticing how the number of recruits has dropped significantly. Still, he understands it after everything they have gone through during training. Suddenly, he notices a handsome man sitting near him. He does not realize that the man is actually the president. Curious, Jiro wonders if this person is also an employee. At that moment, the president asks if he is Jiro Tanaka. Before he can respond, Evia announces that they will now welcome the president. The man casually stands up and walks toward the stage while lightly humming. When he arrives, Evia gently scolds him for behaving so carelessly. He simply apologizes and tells her to relax a bit. He then approaches the microphone, introduces himself as the president, and says that he is counting on everyone. With a bright smile, he tells them not to be afraid of him and to remember his face rather than the fact that he is their president. He ends his speech with a playful wink, while Jiro trembles slightly in his seat. The president further announces that all facilities and dungeons will be fully opened once the initiation ceremony concludes. Afterward, Suera approaches Jiro and congratulates him on officially joining the company. Jiro is still shocked, explaining that he had no idea the president had been sitting beside him casually all along. Suera explains that the president is a very carefree person. She adds that he was actually the one who suggested entering this world in the first place, and that this carefree nature is part of his charismatic personality. For Jiro, it is his first time meeting someone like that. Suera further mentions that the president is also the one who strongly wishes to return to Ishwar. She then quickly changes the topic and suggests that they should go shopping first. Jiro is confused, so Suera explains that there is a large shopping mall located in the basement of the building, where he can find everything he needs, including armor and weapons. When they arrive, Jiro is shocked by how massive the place is. Suera suddenly says that she originally wanted to help him, but she has work to attend to, so he is on his own. She tells him to explore the mall by himself before leaving. Jiro looks around the enormous space in amazement. There are so many shops that he quickly realizes he cannot spend the entire day wandering around. Since he also has a limited budget, he decides to visit only a few stores and complete his shopping efficiently. As he walks through the mall, he notices a very petite girl struggling to carry a heavy box alone. He quickly goes over to help her, commenting that she looks very pale and asking if she is alright. The girl reveals her fangs and says that she is a vampire. Jiro is surprised, but continues speaking calmly, saying that this is too much work for one person, and asks whether her shop has not opened yet. He also asks if she is working alone. The girl explains that her family members said they did not want to do business with aliens and return to the Demon world. Because of that, she is the emergency substitute and must run the shop entirely on her own. Jiro is annoyed by this, thinking how irresponsible that is. He immediately says that he will help her for a while. For the next few minutes, Jiro helps her move heavy boxes and organize the shop. While walking ahead, he briefly feels something strange, but when he turns around, the girl appears completely normal. Once everything is arranged, Jiro thanks her and says that he is looking to buy a sword. Hearing this, the vampire recommends a shop called Frog Horse Show. She explains that the building has an exterior made of black bricks, and the signboard features a horse show with unusual lettering. Jiro finds the name strange, so she explains that it means "I will forge what does not exist." Satisfied with the guidance, Jiro thanks her and leaves after waving goodbye. Soon, Jiro reaches the recommended shop. As he enters, he is surprised to see an extremely large man standing inside, taller and more intimidating than even his instructors. Feeling slightly nervous, Jiro explains that a vampire recommended this place and that he is here to buy a sword. The shopkeeper apologizes for the vampire's behavior and then asks if he is a vanguard swordsman. After confirming his identity, the shopkeeper reacts with recognition, surprised that everyone seems to already know about him. He then explains that during a recruitment party, Suera had gotten drunk and talked about Jiro extensively in the HR department. Because of that, Jiro has become somewhat well known within the company. Jiro feels slightly annoyed at Suera for spreading his name everywhere. Coming back to the present, the shopkeeper asks if he has any questions. After thinking for a moment, Jiro asks whether he should spend his money on armor or weapons first. The shopkeeper immediately replies that he should prioritize a weapon, explaining that it is better to be offensive than defensive. Jiro asks why. The giant man explains that armor can block attacks, but even if it protects him, it does not help him defeat the enemy. Without offense, he will only keep taking damage. Therefore, it is better to avoid being hit in the first place. Jiro realizes that this is not a game. Getting hit here has real consequences. The shopkeeper continues, explaining that defense is about patience, while victory comes from destructive power. Jiro finds this way of thinking surprisingly straightforward and begins to respond, thinking that it means he should. Jiro completes his thought. If he cannot escape a situation, then he must kill before he is killed. In other words, he needs to aim to win first. After receiving the advice from the giant shopkeeper, Jiro agrees to buy a sword first and says he will use whatever money remains to purchase armor afterward. The shopkeeper points toward the racks filled with beginner-level weapons and tells him he is free to choose from there. As Jiro begins inspecting the different swords, he suddenly feels drawn toward one in particular. It has a strange black stone embedded within it. Standing in front of it, he stares at the weapon for a moment. The shopkeeper notices this and asks if he has found something interesting, but his expression is not entirely pleased. When Jiro asks if there is a problem with the sword, the shopkeeper explains its origin. He says that the blade comes from a mineral tree. These trees are originally planted in the ground and grow by absorbing magic. They develop trunks as hard as iron and are essentially living minerals. The black substance on the handle acts as a sealed core. Because of their properties, these trees are used as resources as they are generally superior to iron. The shopkeeper continues explaining that most blacksmiths forge swords by harvesting these trees while they are still young saplings. They then process them into weapons, which continue to grow afterward by absorbing magical energy. This explanation surprises Jiro. The shopkeeper further adds that if the sword matures properly, it can become harder and sharper than mithril and may even change shape depending on its wielder's will. Some of these mineral tree weapons eventually become legendary swords. Jiro immediately sees it as an incredible weapon, but the shopkeeper quickly shuts down that excitement. He explains that only 1 in 10,000 grows into even a normal usable sword, let alone a legendary one. Most mineral trees fail to develop properly and end up shattering. Because of this unpredictable nature, these weapons are sometimes called the tears of blacksmiths. They grow and evolve on their own by absorbing the user's magic, and the blacksmith has very little control over their final outcome. For every success, there are countless failures, either tears of joy or sorrow. Despite the warning, Jiro slowly raises his hand and reaches for the sword, ignoring the shopkeeper's concerns. The moment he grips it, he feels something strange. It is as if he has been holding the weapon for years already. The sword gives him the uncanny sensation that it is alive and aware of him. Seeing Jiro's reaction, the shopkeeper asks whether he was even listening to anything he just said and reminds him once again that it is a risky choice. Jiro acknowledges the warning, but still says that this sword feels like a signal to him. Just like when he first joined the company, he feels the same strange excitement that makes everything else seem irrelevant. With a small smile, he declares that he will buy it. The shopkeeper sighs, sensing that this decision may bring trouble later, but he does not argue further. Instead, he says that some people are simply chosen by their weapons, and it seems Jiro might be one of them. As a merchant, it is his job to sell weapons to people like that. As Jiro leaves the shop holding the sword, he quietly reflects that both sitting idle and risking everything feel strangely similar now. Like both can lead to destruction or change. The shopkeeper finally accepts his decision and even includes free maintenance and cleaning tools for the sword. He comments that as a giant he respects people with courage like Jiro, and he looks forward to seeing whether this choice brings him joy or sorrow in the future. Jiro feels a bit relieved that he can finally begin his long-awaited work after this training period and focus on his original objective, creating a dungeon that even a hero cannot conquer. Right now, he is standing inside a dungeon and fighting against soul-type creatures. He is currently operating as a first-year dungeon tester in the middle of active combat. The soul demons he faces are extremely strong and keep appearing from multiple directions. Their movements are fast and precise, but Jiro is able to perceive them and respond without hesitation, striking them down one after another as they crash around him. He is determined to survive this harsh training and eventually move on to a real dungeon. Just then, Suera suddenly calls him back. Earlier, she had arranged a meeting with Jiro to give him advice before he officially began his job as a dungeon tester. She explains that the 7 dungeons are each managed by one of the 7 generals. Some of these dungeons are forests, while others are caves. Each dungeon functions like a small world, ruled by its respective general. However, most of the actual work is handled by their subordinates. For example, the Tree Queen is a dark elf, and Suera herself is also serving under one of the generals. Jiro understands that most of the generals exist at a very high level, almost above the clouds, making it unlikely that he will ever meet them directly. Suera does not comment on that, and instead asks whether he has decided which dungeon he wants to visit first. She mentions that many other testers are heading toward the Tree Queen's dungeon. Jiro admits that he was also considering the same option. However, Suera disagrees and says she believes he is more suitable for the King of Machines dungeon. She explains that the floors there are wide, making it easier for him to use large weapons, and even reckless movements will not be a major issue. The enemies in that dungeon are sturdy mechanical-type demons that are difficult to defeat with magic but easier to handle with swords. Jiro thanks her for the advice and asks if he can go all out in that dungeon. Suera replies that he should be careful and urges him not to act recklessly. When Jiro finally arrives at the dungeon, he feels relieved to have space to freely swing his sword. With his newly acquired mineral tree sword, he believes he can handle anything. As he is about to move forward, he notices glowing eyes on the floor and realizes they are drop items. Thinking about profit, he decides to collect them so he can later sell them at the mall. For a brief moment, he becomes distracted by thoughts of earning money, but quickly shakes it off and refocuses on the mission. He reminds himself that everything here is real. He continues fighting through the dungeon, struggling at first but gradually adjusting to the enemy movements. He notices that his monkey screaming skill does not affect these enemies, but he still treats it as a valuable learning experience. Eventually, after pushing through intense battles, he reaches what appears to be the end of the first floor. Feeling he still has energy left, he proceeds up the stairs to the second floor. Carefully stepping forward, he assumes the layout will be similar, allowing him to map the area. However, he fails to notice enemies positioned on the ceiling. Just as he takes a breath of relief, a demon suddenly drops down in front of him. Jiro is startled, realizing he has been ambushed immediately upon reaching the second floor. Even so, he considers this exactly the kind of first real kill experience he expected from a dungeon. He does not hesitate, and quickly draws his sword, preparing to face all incoming enemies. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Evia and another instructor are reviewing student performance scores. Most students have only 2 or 3 points, while some even have negative scores. One instructor comments that the situation is not looking good. They also report receiving complaints from testers, including groups that failed on the first floor. One group even complained that no one warned them about giant wolves appearing in the dungeon. Some students have requested that the difficulty be reduced, which confuses the instructors, as the purpose of the test is meant to be challenging. However, they are not particularly surprised, as they already expected poor results after reviewing the tester's status. Then they receive another report slightly delayed because most other testers have already returned. Looking at the screen, the instructor suddenly becomes serious. They notice that Jiro is still inside the dungeon, continuing to fight. He is currently engaged in combat against a giant demon with a completely different level of power. Jiro quickly realizes that this is a high-tier soul species with a real physical body made of blood. Unlike the earlier enemies, this one does not vanish easily and has actual mass behind its attacks. He struggles desperately against the monster, taking several direct hits, but he refuses to back down. In the end, he manages to land a final decisive blow and defeats it. In the observation room, Evia is visibly shocked. Jiro has not only defeated a Golem-class enemy, but has also reached the 5th floor entirely on his own. She recalls that the dungeon system is designed in a way where testers are technically safe. Their physical bodies remain protected outside within a barrier, while a magical projection enters the dungeon. Even so, the experience still transmits pain, exhaustion, and even psychological trauma. One of the instructors asks whether Evia actually informed the testers about this system, as it is surprising how quickly a normal human adapts to it. They begin to wonder if Jiro is simply unusual, or possibly just reckless and unintelligent. Despite everything, Jiro continues to fight. When he finally exits the dungeon, his body is covered in blood, and he is visibly exhausted, barely able to stand. He stumbles forward and nearly collapses, but Suera quickly rushes in and catches him before he falls completely. Leaning on her, Jiro mumbles that it was extremely exhausting, but at the same time, he also had a lot of fun at the company. Hearing this, Evia tells the instructor that she will trust Jiro to handle the situation moving forward and instructs them to prepare for the next day. Meanwhile, Suera supports Jiro and carries him toward his room, sighing at how he always gets carried away without considering the consequences.
Here I am.